All right. Welcome back to the Views from the Grab a Lot podcast. Today we're going to talk about a couple different things tonight. We're going to talk about the draft, talk about some receivers, a lot of fun stuff to get into. Obviously, the Bills signed Elijah Moore today, so good amount of news to talk about. But I want to go and kind of get our overall thoughts on the NFL draft because there's just so many things to talk about and to digest. And I kind of gave it a few days to kind of let it marinate and see where we're at and kind of see how I feel about this class. Mike, the draft's over. I want to just get your overall feeling about the whole thing. 7 rounds in, they go with 9 picks, ton of defense. Where's your head at right now? Like, are you content with how they played this draft? Are you comfortable with how it went? Or I kind of want to get the lay of the land right now to see how you feel about it, and then I'll kind of go about the way I felt about it.
I feel like they went value hunting. Like a lot of the
Yeah,
things that
for
I've
sure.
seen everywhere is, you know, um, Harrison obviously has probably the most explosive speed out of the draft and
Hmm.
really great ball hawking skills. And he was just a great value at 30. And like a guy like TJ Sanders was just another really great value in the second round. And what was the name of that edge rusher?
Landon Jackson.
Landon Jackson. Like everyone's saying that's just another great depth piece to add into the rotation. He might be able to force for some snaps just to keep everyone you know, rejuvenated and keep the juices
Mm.
flowing and everything. Like pause. But like I just feel like the Bills did a really good job at like searching for value and searching also at the same time for positions of need. I mean, obviously they knew what they needed because their first 5 picks were on defense. I mean, I'm a little bit surprised that they waited so long to take a receiver until the 7th round. I would have
Yeah.
thought maybe they would have reached for a guy. I mean, to be fair, this wasn't necessarily the draft to go reaching for a receiver, so I'm not really
Yeah.
mad at it. Um, I still, I nothing to do with what we're talking about, but I'm still kind of shocked at how Brandon Bean just absolutely lit a fire underneath Jeremy and Joe's ass
Oh,
on live
we're gonna
radio.
talk about it.
I
We
mean,
have to. We have to talk
I
about
and I and you know what's even weirder is that we signed a receiver 2 days after
it.
that rant. I just the
Not
irony
even
in that is
actually,
unbelievable.
not even 30 minutes after what happened on WGR, he had Elijah Moore in for a visit. Obviously, it's probably just purely a coincidence, but
It definitely, but like, what
it's
are the
still
odds?
funny. It's hilarious.
What are the odds?
Yeah, I think the thing with receiver, I think even being said post draft in his post draft presser, like he was surprised himself he didn't take a receiver, and he was kind of projecting the team to get a receiver, but sometimes that's just the way the board works. And I think how it turned out is like there was not a ton of guys at like round 3 through 4 that you were like in love with. I like Kyle Williams while he ends up with the Patriots. There's some guys there. I just didn't think it was a big cluster of guys. And so I think a lot of people got worked up about receiver because, you know, oh, it's the flashiest position. It's a new toy for Josh Allen. It's fun, right? But I just didn't think this draft there was value to be had, and especially with the way they went about it, and they went about it for value, it wasn't the position to do it on. So I felt good about especially the value of those picks. Todd McShay had said on his own draft show he does now for the Ringer that Maxwell Harrison is the best pound per pound athlete in this draft behind Travis Hunter. That's what
I
he
did see
said. Those
that.
are his words.
Yeah, I did see that.
Um, and there's some truth to that, right? Like real elite, dangerous speed at that position.
I mean, he runs a 4.2, what,
Four
8? I
two eight,
mean,
4.28, and it's a position where you can value the 40 time. It's one of those few
yeah,
positions that you can actually use that as sort of a measuring stick to see where they're at and where their speed's at. But obviously, ridiculously talented dude.
great
And
scheme
then,
fit.
yeah, that's the biggest thing too. Like I know he's had his struggles in press man. They'll probably need to do it a little bit more. They're probably going to have more willingness to play a little bit more press man. But I mean, if that's what he has to work on, it's almost like Elam flipped on his head, and that's what I had said earlier. Where Kyrie Elam, when he was drafted by the Bills, he was this man-heavy corner with all the traits and all that good stuff to go along with it, but he wasn't familiar with zone, so he had a big learning curve. Whereas Maxwell Harrison, he'll have to learn how to play man and learn how to play more physical, despite his leaner frame. But it's not going to be as much of a problem. You can trust him 80% of the snaps, and that's
Hmm.
the good thing. So you feel good about that. My favorite pick this draft was the value they got later on in Dorian Strong. I had put out a post maybe a month ago or so, and I'm gonna pat myself on the back because I did the best draft bits for the Bills, and they drafted 3 players I put in this post. Dorian Strong, Landon Jackson, and TJ Sanders. But Dorian Strong, very smart in zone, very instinctive. And I've brought up the name Christian Benford because they're in the same mold of like, they're not this elite athlete. They're not going to be the fastest guy in the field. They're not going to have the makeup and recovery speed to track down Tyreek Hill and all that, but they're smart. They know how to attack the football. They know how to play with length. They know how to, use their technical skill set to put them in advantageous positions. And I think he's going to be a guy. I know it's crazy, but like I could totally see another Christian Benford thing happening. I know Bills fans are going to hate me when I say that, but Dorian Strong has got enough of a floor where you could see another scenario where if Maxwell Harrison doesn't translate at the next level with his smaller frame, Dorian Strong beats him out, and he's like, okay, maybe that's your number 2 corner for a long time.
Even if he's like 70% of Benford, that's still a great pick.
Yeah,
You know
100%.
what I mean?
And that's back to the value talk we had just a couple minutes ago. Like he was a projected early 4th round guy. That's where I had him going in mock drafts. That's where I kind of projected him to be. He falls to the 6th round. And a lot of that is because he isn't this elite athlete and teams are taking swings on the guys that have traits and guys that maybe have more potential. But I think when you're drafted in round 6 and 7, you can't really be picky. I think you just take the best football player and that's it. And that's what they did.
I feel like now that you mentioned Tyreek Hill, and it really just, I don't know, just kind of sent me back to where I feel like some of the Harrison selection was, okay, we got absolutely murdered by Xavier Worthy in the playoff game. Yeah. And obviously they've struggled against speedy receivers in the past. I mean, they struggled horrifically against Tyreek Hill for years. Puka, not the fastest guy, but was getting open, I mean, at will. It was like, I feel like they got their guy to finally go and just throw him out in the field and be like, okay, do not let him get downfield. Like, yes. you don't have to, be physical, don't have to anything. You just need to keep up, and you need to be able to stay with him until either a safety comes and helps you or just make a play. And obviously with the ball hawking like skill that he has, I think McShay said he had 3 pick sixes in college.
Yes, he did. He did. That's a Kentucky record, by the way.
That's crazy. But, I think that's massive. I really think that if this draft, if anything from this draft, like let's say we don't get another Benford, which I really don't anticipate, but let's say from this draft we end up gaining true depth at the cornerback position from it, then I think it's a win.
That's what we needed.
Yeah.
And Sam, I agree. It did get better. And like the floor was raised, even if you're not looking from the draft lens, the signings they made. Tre'Davious White, is he the same player he was? No, but he is I've said this as multiple times. He is a good veteran soundboard for those 2 rookies. They can lean on him. This system better than anybody's ever played it. You have been the most successful in terms of top end play we've gotten out of that position. You're the goal. You're the peak at that position. No offense to Christian Benford. I just don't think his prime is on the same level as Tre'Davious White was before his injuries. That is very important for those guys to have another player on the team that they can lean on. And so how they approached the corner position this offseason, I was a huge fan of it. I think they did it well. Even if you want to look at Dane Jackson as your 5th corner, you could do a hell of a lot worse. And I know we probably don't want to see him opposite of Christian Benford come week 1. It's good depth, right? That's what
honestly,
he is.
I'm just happy that we cut our losses with Elam.
Yeah.
After that playoff game, I just could never see him play for this team.
It was bad. Again. It was really bad.
Ever again.
And the more you think about it, it's like the scheme fit wasn't there. It just didn't make a ton of sense.
They went out and did the absolute exact opposite with this 1st round pick.
Yes. Yeah. It's tough. I wanted to talk about some of the later on draft picks that we're gonna look at. So Deone Walker, 4th round pick, another Kentucky guy. The Bills just love Kentucky guys for some reason. Very, very fun player. A guy who was once viewed as a top 15 kind of pick, immense potential. This was before, we're talking 2023. That's how he was viewed. rare size. He's 6'7", 330 pounds. There's not many dudes like that in the NFL. And he can move very well. I think the people that get mixed up with is like, oh, he's gonna stop the run. That's just not what he does. Think about Jordan Phillips. Like, I'm not saying he's going to be Jordan Phillips. I'm not going to say he's better. I'm not going to say he's worse. In that mode of a player, just a bigger defensive tackle that is primarily going to be used as a pass rusher. That is what De'Aaron Walker is. He has really good movement ability, and he's got the power. The problem with him is he fucked up his back. And that's a problem that happens for a lot of taller dudes. When you're taller like that, you're going to be more susceptible to back injuries. And, it's tough because you want to also play low. And when you're a taller dude, you can't gain leverage if you're tall. So those are some things that are going to have to be worked out. But in terms of value, I think it's a home run because we're talking about a dude that has the potential of a first-round pick. We're talking about a dude that had 7 sacks as a 330-pound man. Not many people would do that. Like, this is the kind of swings I want to see in round 3. These are the kind of picks I want to see made round 4. That's what we need. We need to swing for the fences. You need to find those difference makers later on. And that's where Bean has been so money, is because they've had this same strategy for years and years now, and it's paid off immensely.
And they strongly addressed the pass rush this entire offseason way differently than they have in the past. Obviously they tried for like 2 straight years to just patch it with the draft. And then obviously they tried to
– I agree, Ryan.
Obviously they tried to, take the big swing and sign Von Miller. This offseason, they kind of did the best of both worlds. They went out, they got, if healthy, a premier pass rusher in Joey Bosa, and he didn't necessarily break the bank for you. You re-signed Greg Rousseau. You still have some pieces there, but you added young, super high potential depth. Even Hoyt could be a very solid signing. I'm going to mess up his last name. That defensive tackle that got suspended. Ogunjobi. Yes, I knew I was going to mess that up. So we signed Ogunjobi. That's another really solid depth piece. It's like we signed a bunch of guys to where it's like they may not all work out, but even if a couple of them work out, we're going to be way better than we were. Like I think they addressed the depth on this defense perfectly for the cornerbacks and the entirety of the pass rush and defensive line this offseason. I couldn't have done it much better.
Yeah, I think what had happened was Bean learned his mistake from Von Miller. Let's not put all of our eggs into one basket again and make that same mistake, because if it doesn't work, you're in the same spot you were last year. You go out and you add a Landon Jackson who's got upside. You go out and add Joey Bosa, the other names you have mentioned. You're kind of dipping your hand in different areas, right? And you're allowing yourself to have a more complete unit, a fresh unit. And we talk about the Eagles is like the golden standard of the league, having a deep unit that has multiple guys that can rotate in and out, so they're fresh when they do come in and are able to generate really high-level pass rush reps. And that's what I think you can get.
Honestly, the Eagles just fucked around and went and drafted the best college defensive line that damn near ever was.
It does help when your GM is Howie Roseman, because he just nails it.
And in the first round, you just get even this year.
Blue chip player you could think of. Jahad Campbell was ridiculous.
Yeah. Oh, you have a drug problem? Great. Thanks for falling 15 picks. We're gonna take you.
Yep, that's it. But I like the value they had this year. I can't complain about it. And I know people want to get caught up in receiver. I just can't do that, because I'm like, defense has been the problem. It's been the problem for year after year after year. And I've been getting in these arguments on Twitter, on Instagram, and everywhere, like, oh, we need receivers. Oh, we need this. We scored 29 points in the AFC Championship game. That should be more than enough against that kind of defense.
The thing is with the offense, though, and with the receivers, right? We were going into last year. We're like, Kincaid's going to be the number one target. He needs to be the number one target. This team has no receivers outside of Shakir. Okay, well, Kincaid was not the number one target, and for the first 7 games of the year, there really was no other receiver besides some of Matt Collins and Khalil Shakir. Yep. And Amari Cooper didn't necessarily do anything big for this team, but he brought stability. And I think they valued that. And I think that what they went out and they did this offseason is, no, they didn't go out and get the big fish guy. No, they didn't go out and draft a big name guy. They went out and they got more stability. Josh Palmer signing, very consistent player. For the most part, you know what you're getting from Josh Palmer, and that goes further than, I would say, 80% of the receivers that were in that room. Like Keon Coleman, you had no idea what you were getting. Just you had no idea what you were getting from those guys. And they added stability. They got younger. yes, they spent more money than I probably anticipated, but
Mhm.
I'm happy with that too. I don't necessarily think that we needed to go out. Like I was never that guy that was just like, yeah, we're gonna go out and we're gonna, as much as I liked him, we're gonna go out and we're gonna go draft Matthew Golden, or we're gonna go draft Luther Burden, or
Yeah.
we're gonna go do something crazy. Like I never anticipated that,
I
and I
never
wouldn't have been
anticipated that
thrilled.
either.
I wouldn't
No.
have been thrilled with that. I would have felt very like, okay,
Yeah.
I guess we'll see,
I
more uncertainty, you know?
I kind of felt like when you my biggest thing, right, with the receivers when we talk about that, the Bills offense, like you got to remember this, the personnel and the way Joe Brady runs his offense, it doesn't need an elite receiver.
No.
Even
It
dating
showed you
back,
what it was with an elite receiver.
yeah, you even dating back to when he was in Carolina, he never needed one. And I'm talking
Yeah.
at the NFL level. Obviously, college level, he had insane talent. Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, like that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But um,
Pretty sure he had Brian
you
Thomas
know,
Jr. too.
the way his offense is run is more of a West Coast style, quick passing game, RPOs, bubble screens. Like that's his bread and butter. Whether you like it or not, that's just the personnel they use. So, from a business perspective and Brandon Beane's perspective, why would you go out and invest a ton in a receiver that's not going to
In
be the
this
focal
year's
point of the
draft or
offense?
this year's free agency class.
To me, it screams we just have to do it to force ourselves to do it. You bring in players that fit into your scheme, and obviously, like they had to make the move for Amari Cooper, right? But I
Yes.
think with the names you have now, and a guy we'll talk about in a little bit with Elijah Moore, who I'm a big fan of,
Me too.
you have different ways and different avenues to get the ball around. Like whereas before Amari Cooper, it was like Keon Coleman, like you're a very raw player, and you're gonna just push you in there. Curtis Samuel was banged up. Like there was a lot of factors that led them to make that decision before that trade was made. So I think receiver, I'm fine with. I don't need this superstar wide receiver. The offense had historical marks, points scored, touchdown scored in franchise records.
You don't need
I
it.
can't.
You need to see what you have. You can't
Yes.
go out and get that number one guy right now because you don't necessarily know what you have. You know what I mean?
And
Like I said,
yeah.
obviously you gain more consistency, but you don't know what the upside of this offense is looking like. And what I think is going to end up happening is if this offense looks flat again for the first 2 months like it did last year,
Yeah.
they'll go out and get somebody. Anybody. Like
Yeah.
they'll go out and get a guy. Like they're not just going to let it drown.
No.
I'm not concerned about it because Brandon Beane has now shown me that if that position is lackluster or stagnant in any sort of way, he will not just leave it alone. He will
Yeah.
improve that position, especially that position.
Mhm.
Frankly, any position on this roster, like I got to say, that's probably one of the best things about him is that if there is a position of need and it's significantly noticeable, for the vast majority of the time, he does a really great job at addressing that need.
Yes.
He very rarely just
Especially
leaves the
receiver.
position out there to
Especially
die.
receiver.
Yes.
Because he has been that has been the position he's been the most aggressive with. Like you
Yeah.
traded for Diggs, you traded for Cooper, even back to his first season as GM, he traded for Calvin Benjamin. Like he wants to bring in receivers if he
Mhm.
needs to, and
Yes.
if it calls for it, he will add a receiver. So I think knowing that you have sort of a play in your back pocket where you can get a guy maybe for cheaper than he would be in the offseason, in the middle of the season, yeah, granted it's a little bit more difficult to integrate him into the offense. You're still getting a guy. And I think there is still different avenues to add talent if it calls for it. I just don't see it as a absolute pressing need. Going into this offseason, did everybody at the top of their wish list was receiver your number one priority? No. It was fix the defense, get to the quarterbacks, convert pressures into sacks, find good talent opposite of Christian Benford. They did all those things. They added to the pass rush. They added multiple guys. They invested a ton. And I know they've done it before, but this year they went draft, they went free agency. They put a ton of guns and ammunition towards that position, and they added the corner. They added at safety even for depth. This is a group that I feel good about more as the floor going into this year. And last year there was a lot of uncertainty with a lot of different positions. This year it doesn't feel like that.
People forget
a lot
watching
better.
games at the end of the season. The majority of the time, you're sitting on your couch or you're at the game and you're watching it. You weren't thinking, "Oh damn, like we really need a receiver." You're thinking, "Oh damn, they can't stop anybody on third down. They
Yes.
can't stop anybody in general. They
That
can't
was
make
the biggest
stop.
problem.
Like they could not stop anything." And it's like
Yeah.
if we were going to go into this season with that again, you can't expect a different result. You have to be, if you get enough stops this team will score because they have Josh Allen. You know what I mean? You get him enough
You got to
possession,
do enough.
he will
You got to
score
do
enough
enough.
points. You know, like
Yeah.
it doesn't matter if you have Diggs. It doesn't matter if you put out fucking prime Randy Moss. If the other team's scoring 40 points, Josh Allen has shown you that he could score 3 passing touchdowns and 3 rushing touchdowns in the same fucking game and lose.
Yes.
Which is
it's exactly
still
the point.
ridiculous. That's still
The
that's
offense
one of the craziest
was
things.
that
ever.
Rams game was, I think, the biggest deterrent for me about getting this. Like, they found ways to score. They found ways to get it to running backs. They found ways to get it to tight ends in that game.
Everyone scored.
Everything was clicking.
Ate.
Even in the Lions game, we were up by 2 scores for the majority of that game, and you still felt uncomfortable because the defense couldn't stop anything.
Right.
And that's the problem. That's where the problem starts. You need to raise the floor as a defense. You need to do better as a defense, frankly. And I know Sean McDermott is, a solid coach, but he needs to do better too. This defense and this group needs to improve this year, and that was priority number 1. They took care of it. So I can't sit here and complain about
That's the biggest thing we're going to look for. We're going to sit there week 1. We were sitting there week 1 last year. We were sitting there watching this Cardinals game just like they need to get pressure. They need to get pressure.
Yeah.
And the game was stagnant and the game was, close. And then in the second, I don't know if you remember, but in the second half, they started getting more pressure.
Yeah,
and they
I do remember. Greg Rousseau had, I think, a couple sacks in this game.
Yeah, he had a huge second half. Second half. And that's the thing is we're going to be looking at the start of this game or at the start of this season, are they going to be able to get home? The more often you get home, the more often you're going to create turnovers. The more often you create turnovers, the more often that you score, the more possessions that you get, giving yourself more opportunities to score, gaining momentum. Like putting your foot on the other team's neck and keeping it there. There's been so many games over the last 5 years where it's just like you got to put them away. You got to put them away. And most of the time we win just because we're that good. But there's just times where we're not putting teams away that we absolutely should because of the defensive, deficiencies.
I even think one other thing I was super concerned with is I value pressures. I value that as a stat. It affects the quarterback, right? But there's a point in time where you need to convert those pressures into sacks, and those need to turn into sacks.
I would say
and you need to create
more valuable than sacks.
It definitely is.
Determines a pressure,
it definitely is.
But because if you can get, I don't know, 18 pressure, I don't know what the average is, but if you can get an extremely high rate of pressures and your sack numbers are low, I prefer that because obviously putting the quarterback under duress more often is better. But yes, they do need to convert those more into sacks because obviously God knows how many plays that we have had over the years where it's just been, pass rusher gets home and then Mahomes is making some sort of play with his legs or just something stupid is happening.
In those bigger games, I don't think all the pressures are created equal, right? Like you have a super talented guy like Mahomes who can evade that pressure and turn it into a great play. That's what happens when you get to January. You face really good quarterback talent.
Yeah.
Even Lamar Jackson a couple of times in that divisional game, there were times where they had him, and I know Lamar's super elusive and he's a great pocket. He's great at maneuvering in the pocket, but you got to be able to get him on the ground. That's I think priority number 1, and that's why I think they brought in a guy like Bosa to hope you solidify that a little bit.
Because Bosa's good enough to make it a hell game. Bosa can have weeks where he's going to make it an absolute hell game for the other team. And they're going to be like, holy shit, get this motherfucker off the field immediately.
You need to have those guys where defenses are going to have to prepare for and game plan for. And, I think defenses obviously already prepared for the length and the size and what he can do in the run game with Greg Rousseau. And he's obviously going to convert with some pressure and some power. But having another guy that's more consistent than Von Miller was after the injury, and finding
I think there's a chance we bring Von back on something criminally.
It probably is possible. I wanted to talk about a little bit with wrap up on the draft before we kind of talk about receivers fully. Couple more picks that I did like. I did want to talk about Chase Lunt and Jordan Hancock. Jordan Hancock played at Ohio State national champion, obviously. And people were like, "Oh, why did you take 3 corners?" He projects as a more of a nickel, so he's a different position. He does play corner, but he is a nickel. Plays safety. Does crazy versatility with him, and a lot of Ohio State fans are a big fan of this guy. He does a lot of different things for them, and he plays with a lot of aggressiveness too. So I think he's a player that probably is going to be somebody you're looking at to replace a guy like Cam Lewis and potentially maybe even Taron Johnson in the future somewhere down the line. And, it wasn't like the sexiest pick in the world, but it made sense because it's a position I think you're upgrading. And again, back to depth, you're upgrading the depth of this team. So when a guy does come down, and we've seen it so many times with the Bills where key players and key starters exit the game, even back to that week 1 game we talked about, what got him in that position is Taron Johnson left the game on the first drive, and they had to put in Cam Lewis. And, the defense suffered as a result. They obviously were able to adjust in the second half and find out what works. But if you have guys that can come in and fill in a role like that, especially on a rookie contract, you can't complain. Chase Lunt, tackle out of Connecticut, real good run blocker, good size. I think a guy Aaron Kromer's going to love. You think about all the guys that have been in for depth. Alec Anderson, I don't even think he was drafted. Ryan Vandemark, I believe he was undrafted as well. So, the quality depth this team has is late round picks, the guys that can block their ass off, play with fire under their ass, and do some nice things. Caden Prather, obviously the 7th round pick out of Maryland. I wasn't super high on him. I like some other receivers that were on the board. But again, we're talking about round 7. I'm not going to waste my breath on that. He's probably hard chance he makes the roster as is. So obviously
very soon.
I've given my grades on it. Everybody's seen him. I posted on Twitter. I posted on Instagram. You can go ahead and look that up on Bills Access. I felt good about this draft. I felt good about the value. I like the approach they took. I'm not mad that they didn't take a receiver. No. I honestly would say this was probably one of my favorite drafts in a while. Probably a few years.
I think we're going to look back on this draft and be like, okay, it was necessary. They needed this draft.
They needed it. And then, if Maxwell Harrison comes in and he's able to mitigate what Kansas City does through the air, I think it's immediate success after that.
Maxwell Harrison could suck the entire fucking season, and if he shuts down Xavier Worthy in a playoff game against the Chiefs, great. Home run. Great pick.
Yeah. So obviously there's a lot to like. And Landon Jackson, I didn't even talk about too much on, but tons of like. We'll talk about receiver, though, because the Bills made a move today. You and I discussed it a little bit earlier. They brought in Elijah Moore. They signed Elijah Moore. Cleveland Browns had a very productive season with the Browns last year. I want to see it over 70 catches. Very solid season for Cleveland.
Really?
Yeah, real. I was kind of taken aback at myself when I looked it up.
See, I've been an Elijah Moore guy for a while now. I wanted us to take Elijah Moore in the draft. I wanted us to trade for Elijah Moore when he became available from the Jets. I'm happy with this, just as a face value. 61 catches, 538 yards, and a ton.
Pretty good, right? And I think he's also shown experience playing outside. He's played, obviously, mostly slot snaps. That's what people reject him as, but he's not going to play on the slot with Khalil Shakir here. He can play on the outside. He's got good speed. He's the second sub 4.4 40 receiver we have on the roster, not named Curtis Samuel. So that's a plus. He gives you speed. He gives you separation. He can win with his route tree very successfully. So he does a nice job of getting open, being sort of a safety valve, if you will, at the receiver position. So you kind of get a little bit of the Khalil Shakir element to it, but you can also move him around. And I think that's what the Bills liked about him. They were probably entranced with his speed, something this offense has needed for a little bit. So maybe he can be more of your deep threat and somebody you can look for to stretch the field a little bit.
I still think our primary deep threat is going to be Palmer.
Yeah, probably.
But I don't know. I guess Elijah Moore is super versatile. I still wonder if he makes the roster. I don't know how much the 1-year deal was worth.
So it's an incentive based deal, right? It's up to $5 million. That's what you're looking for, and obviously the incentives drive it up to the max is $5 million. I want to say.
How much guaranteed?
Probably nothing. It's anything that says worth up to. It's usually nothing. Again, I'm a fan of it, right? Because you talk about this receiver room. The only problem, the issue I had with this receiver room, right, is we didn't have enough speed. We didn't have enough, you didn't have a curveball to throw at defenses. Mm-hmm. You have a lot of speed, and you didn't have a ton of off speed stuff, right? Or flip it around, right? You know what I mean? So I think this offense it's an element that they missed. It's an element that they needed. And Elijah Moore checks a lot of boxes, so I can't complain
And there was
whatsoever
no
with that
burner
move.
in this draft either, I gotta say. Like, if there was a guy, if there
Mhm,
was a receiver, I mean, there was like Matthew Golden and everything, but like, if there was like
mhm.
a guy out there that was like within their range
Yeah,
that had like that 4.3 speed, I think maybe they would have taken the swing on him solely just because of that need.
yeah,
You know, I'm happy that they signed Elijah Moore for that reason too. Obviously, his bread and butter is the slot, though. You know, like
yeah.
yes, he's versatile and he can move around. I think he will play some in the slot. I think Shakir's good enough to go anywhere. I mean, obviously he's a great slot receiver, but you could probably put him anywhere, and I think he'll be fine.
Yeah, I mean, I want to keep Shakir in the slot just because he's had so much success there. I know you could probably play around with it, right? But I just like the way this receiver room is set up right now because,
Three receiver set right now. Who are the three receivers?
well, I think that I was just about to get into that. So the way that's set up, right? You paid Palmer, you feel like he's a lock. You know, you
Mhm.
just paid Shakir, you feel like he's a lock. Obviously, Keon's got some growing to do, but I think you got 4 or 5 options now. You can safely roll out there, and you won't see a drop off. That's the thing. Because if one of these guys get hurt, are you really going to feel any different about this receiver room at all?
No,
No, because you got your first two I just mentioned. Then you got Keon, and then you got Josh Palmer, and then probably Elijah Moore, who's going to make the team as well. I mean, that's 5 guys right there that you all feel comfortable and has had some level of success in this league at various
is
points.
Kincaid dead? Like, is he just dead in the
No,
water? Are we
no,
just
he's
like
definitely not. If
he's
Kincaid was dead
cooked?
in the water, they would have invested way more at the tight end position.
I'm
They
saying your
believe in him.
personal opinion, not the Bills. Like,
No,
I'm saying
no,
your personal opinion. Are you expecting a better year?
I can't sit up here and write them off yet just because of the way the rookies have played for the Bills, right? And young players have developed for the Bills. I'm gonna give him time like I have with any other player the Bills have brought in because we've seen it, right? Like Terrell Bernard, Spencer Brown, these were late bloomers, if you will. I've mentioned this many times in many different episodes. You can go back and look at me and see what I said.
We really
This
hated
is the
Spencer Brown
reality.
for a minute there.
Yeah, I mean, like he didn't play well out the
No,
gate. Like that's the
no.
Bills are patient and willing. And that's falls back into the line of thinking they when it comes to drafting, like they take sort of these bigger swings on traitsy guys, and sometimes it takes a while to acclimate themselves at the NFL level because they might have the traits, but they don't have the mental capacity to play at the NFL level at the level they want to.
I just feel like our expectations were so astronomically high
They
that
were.
obviously they reached a point where it was like that's
Mhm.
not obtainable.
They were.
But I don't know. I'm not I'm not fully out on Kincaid, but I can't say that I'm in. I just feel like there was it's not like he went out there and played bad because he
Yeah.
didn't. He was just a ghost, and that's what concerns me. Is it's like if you went out there and you just were dropping the ball all the time, or just I don't know mistakes. It's like okay, we could work on that. You know, at least you're
Yeah.
getting the volume. At least you're getting the opportunities. When you're just a ghost, it's like are you really going to end up being a focal point on this offense? Like, I just can't sit here and say that I think Kincaid's going to end up being a focal point as a receiver on this team and this season. Like, I won't
Mhm.
be mad if he is, but I just can't sit here and say that I anticipate that.
Well, I don't think you can anticipate with anybody, right? Like, I don't think there's like this clear projection for anybody not named Khalil Shakir. I think there's a multitude of
There's some
ways
for
that.
Palmer. There's some for Palmer.
You said that about
Some.
Curtis Samuel last year. Something can happen. Like, I feel like the
Hey,
only
he
proven
showed up when it
commodity.
mattered.
Sure, okay. Besides the point, the only proven commodity on this offense right now is Khalil Shakir, and I think that's
James Conner.
pretty clear. Yeah, not we're talking receivers.
Yeah,
Uh,
true.
the only clear like commodity at receiver is Khalil Shakir. So I think the production can go in a lot of different ways. Brandon Beane had said, at the owners meetings that Josh Palmer's a player I think a lot of people are going to think of differently next year. So I think
Mhm.
he's given high praise, and obviously it's a recent free agent acquisition, and
They gave
he
him a
wants to
lot of
talk up
money.
his investment. But it was a steep price, and obviously that's the value you get when you pay a receiver in free agency. That's the market. That's how it goes. But we'll see what happens. But I feel good about this room just because, like I said, the depth of it makes me feel good about the floor. The ceiling is still unknown because Keon Coleman could still theoretically take that major jump we all expect him to do and expected him to do last year. And I think even before that wrist injury, you go back. to the Seattle games and the Tennessee games, he played like a monster in those
He
games.
did.
Like you
He
saw it. The flashes were there. Let's not
They
act
were.
like as Bills fans, Keon Coleman is this slow dude who can't separate. That might be true, but we can't act like those games
No,
didn't
that's
happen.
definitely true. That is definitely true.
It's true.
He may not be able to separate, but he still may end up being good. Is what you meant.
Yeah.
But
And
that's
I'm just like I'm saying that the flashes were there. He obviously has shown us an ability to produce. And so I feel like knowing in the back of my mind, like Keon's done it. Can he string it together? Can he figure it out?
Keon's 1,000-yard receiver next year. I'd probably shit a brick. But I'm gonna be.
I mean, there's real potential. There's real potential.
I'm not saying he can't because he could. It's just I would not expect it. I just would not.
Yeah, I'm not like even gonna talk about expectations because I think it's all over the place. I think everybody has different opinions
It's
and
still
whatnot.
early.
It is very early. Like
No,
we're gonna see what the depth chart looks like in a couple months here. See who the Bills are trotting out at St. John Fisher and see who's getting the snaps. I think that will give us a good early indicator of where they're at, and then we'll kind of go from there. Obviously, things can change. Like I don't think people anticipated that Matt Collins was gonna be playing the role he did. Like he was borderline like a very. I don't even think borderline. I think he was a very valuable asset in that offense, especially in the postseason.
I'm still big sad that we lost him.
I am. You have a good night, Ryan.
Good night, Ryan.
Do appreciate all 60 viewers being in here, by the way, tonight. It's been a blast so far. I just think knowing that there's so much that could happen, I'm not going to get caught up in thinking about receiver. They've made the clear investments. They've brought in guys. And even a guy like Elijah Moore, we talked about, he's young. He still has room to grow. And we talk about he hasn't played with a single good quarterback in his entire NFL career. And I know we made the same argument about Curtis Samuel last year. I get it. But it's still something that is worth talking about. Because a guy who was a first-round potential kind of pick
33.
Still shown an ability to separate, has speed, has shown that at the NFL level, has shown the qualities he was drafted to be. He was drafted for. It makes me feel good about that investment, even if it's a smaller one. So I like the floor of this receiver room. We don't know what the ceiling is. Nobody knows what the ceiling of this receiver room is because we've seen crazy breakouts happen. We've seen players step up in roles that we haven't anticipated to step up in. So, right now, if I had to give it a grade, 1 out of 10, I give it like a 6. And like that's fine. That's fine. I can live with a 6 or 5 or a 6 as an average receiver room. I can live with that. I would say it kicks into average because, yes, they don't have any top-end talent, but they just have a bunch of dudes that can do different things, and not many teams have that kind of depth.
They went from last year being chronically mid
to like mid.
Slightly mid.
Yeah.
Like they're still mid, but they might be okay.
They definitely upgraded it.
Yes.
Like it's gotten better.
Yeah.
So
it was a ghost town last year. Absolute ghost town for those first 7 weeks.
It was. But yeah, I mean, all things considered, basically going to be done with the offseason, right? You think about everything and all the moves that have been made. If you have to give a letter grade to what Brandon Beane has done this offseason, what would you give it?
B+.
B+. I would agree with you on that.
Yeah.
I feel like B+ is fair.
I mean, could it end up being an A-? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But for me to give it that right now would feel irresponsible. And I also don't feel that like inside me either. Like pause. Like literally like I don't know. I think what would have given me this offseason an A is if instead of Joey Bosa, they did go out and get Myles Garrett or something, which obviously wasn't on the table all along, but something like that, like it would have had to have been something monstrous beyond.
Would it like say if they broke the bank for a guy like Josh Sweat or something like that? Would that move it to an A for you, or would you kind of just? I never
really was.
I wasn't a Sweat guy. I wasn't
really all in it. I would have been fine with it. Like I would have been. I think I still would have given it a B. I feel like Josh Sweat for me a signing like that
Doesn't
with him
move
in
the
the same
needle. I
tier as
feel like
Bosa.
that doesn't move the yeah, I was gonna say the same thing. Like, that's what the good thing about the investment in Bosa, right? Because like, you're not tied to him long term.
Right.
It's a short-term deal, and if it works out, great, we salute you. You're probably gone, you're probably getting paid by another football team,
So be
and
it.
you
Go
did
to
a
San
great thing for
Francisco with
us.
your brother.
And, we probably have the solve the need again next year, but if we're trying year by year to win a championship, like, obviously, you
I
wanna
think
think
if
in terms
Joey
of long term.
Bosa, I gotta say, I think if Joey Bosa comes out and he has an all pro season and he's all what Joey Bosa is and he's just gross.
He's gotta stay
I
healthy, that's a big
uh,
one.
right. And let's say he does. Let's say Bosa plays like 14 games next year. 15 games.
Yeah.
Still get banged up a couple games. I expect it, let's say he does that, comes out, I don't know, 13 plus sacks, and he's really making a run as one of the top premier pass rushers statistically in the league. I think there's a good chance that Brandon Beane pays him. I do. I think that I don't think he's gonna give him like this massive extension, like 5 years, $140 million,
Mhm.
but could I see him rewarding him for that and sticking to his guns with that player that he went out and sought after? Yes, because this has been such a long road that I think they're not going to be super willing to just let that pass them by if the opportunity
Mhm.
is there.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah,
Leonard
I
Floyd.
understand.
Like they went out, they got Leonard Floyd. They knew what they were going to get from Leonard Floyd, and he was very productive. But they were very okay with him walking away. This I feel like it's going to be way more important to them if it works out.
Yeah.
You
I
know?
think, like you said, if the production forces him to do that, I think you'll obviously
And you got to
probably be
see what
more
this
likely
does
to
for
keep him.
Rousseau.
Yeah. Yeah, for
You
sure.
know,
And I think it's an entire domino effect in all the investments they've made. You go over the depth. And I feel good about what they did this offseason. Like, is there different kinds of flavors and styles I would have liked? Sure. But overall, the guys they brought in, it was an upgrade. It was a much needed upgrade. And
yes,
I think especially you think about the interior where you just talked about the edge rusher position. Daquan Jones, it's likely probably going to be his last year as a Bill. Talk about that. He's got that downward decline.
yeah.
And obviously, he hasn't really been the same player since those injuries. And one thing I had mentioned earlier when I talked about it with somebody, defensive tackle, and I think about how the success of when Daquan Jones, before he tore his pec, of him and Ed Oliver in the interior, they were unstoppable.
Yeah,
That before that Jaguars game, that good 4-week run, that
yeah.
defense, that front looked like the
They
most
were
dangerous it's
killing it
ever looked.
in
And the
years.
pressures numbers, the sack numbers, they all speak for itself. They had, I think, 6 sacks against Sam Howell. And I know the Commanders line was terrible, but
Hmm.
it's not an easy thing to do, right?
No.
And they had guys, they were able to go or out and rotate and use.
I
Before
think
we wrap
Brandon
up here,
Beane tweaked out because I think he wants people to realize that no, I may not all the time go out and get the biggest name, go out and get
mhm,
the biggest fish. But you know what I am going to do? I'm going to go out and I'm going to build a team.
yeah,
And he is. He's building a team, just a solid collective, and most of the time, a solid collective is
mhm.
better than just having a group of guys and three great players, you
So
know.
would you agree with Brandon Beane's just overall stance when he went on WGR, went on that huge tirade? Are you on his side completely or?
I'm on his side 80%.
Mhm.
I'm on his side 80% because I do not think this was the year to go out and get the guy. Last year might have been. This year, I don't think it was. And
Yeah.
I think it was smart to be patient. And I think if you're going to go out and get a guy, do it when you absolutely feel like I need him. I
And you
need
have
this
no
player on the
other
team.
you
Yes.
have other needs that are solved and you feel good
Yes,
about the
that
rest of
aren't
the roster.
major, aren't because there was major needs on the defense, major needs. It wasn't like, oh, we could use it. No, you needed that.
Mm.
Part of me that disagrees with him is I don't necessarily think it's a good look to be crashing out on the local
No,
radio
I
guys,
agree. I agree.
especially Jeremy and Joe are like probably they're the morning show of Buffalo sports. Like they're the biggest platform that you could probably go on to speak to Western New York.
Mhm.
And I understand where they're coming from. I don't think they're looking at it from a fantasy football perspective of like we just need like ESPN where it's like, oh, they traded Diggs, they need to get this guy. Like they were just the odds-on favorite, damn near, for every big fish receiver that's been out there since they've moved Diggs.
Mm-hmm.
And so it'd almost be irresponsible of them to not mention it, to not probably push it, to be like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, this is a need, this is a need, this is a need. Like, we all know it. Bean knows it. Deep down, he knows, is this great? No. Am I content with it? Yeah. And it will maybe be good. Great. Like, if it's good, he's thrilled. You know what I mean? So I would say I'm like 80% on Bean's side, to where it was like, this just wasn't the right time. Stop giving me so much shit.
Yeah. That's the biggest thing. I don't think he went about it the right way. Like, it's at the end of the day, their opinions should not matter to him, right? Like, that's what it boils down to for me. Like, they're just talking heads on a radio show, like you and I on a podcast
Yes.
on
It'd
YouTube.
be like if
if we brought up,
motherfucker, do you know what this defense is?
Yeah,
No.
like,
Okay, bozo, stop talking about this.
I don't think he should have went about it, just because it's like their opinions don't matter. Like, it shouldn't even bother you in the slightest. And the fact that he went about it like that, it's like, okay, I get it. I understand that, like, media isn't always going to be great. Like, they are going to piss off players. They're going to piss off fans. Like, but it's up to you as a professional. You're one of 32 jobs in the world to not let that, strike your nerve. A part of being a GM is being composed and being able to handle different kinds of pressures. And I just didn't think it was a good look. But again, I do agree with his stance. I'm not disagreeing with. I mean, like, the focus on receiver and put all of our energy on receiver, when, like you said, there was major needs on this defense that needed to be solved, especially this offseason. If in a season, next season, we re-sign Joey Bosa before the offseason starts and the defense looks good, you feel about it like you don't need to make major swings there, then I think you could start pushing it a little bit more and arguing, hey, we need to really upgrade here because we're really going for it. We have a good, complete defense for the first time in a while. Let's start putting some more eggs in the basket of offense.
Mm-hmm.
But this offseason, I think you put it perfectly. I think you hit the nail on the head. It wasn't the offseason to do that. There were so many needs. Money was spent. Capital was used. Your defense was terrible. You let up 44 against the Rams. You let up 40-plus against the Lions, 30-plus against the Chiefs. It needed to be solved.
Like, real quick, okay? So this offseason, in a nutshell, we extended Bernard, we extended Rousseau, we extended Shakir, and Benford.
Yep.
On top of that, you fulfilled major needs on your defense in the draft. You fulfilled major needs on the defense and offensive depth in free agency, and you went out and got a relatively bigger name in Joey Bosa. Now, let's say out of those guys that you re-signed half of them. You fulfilled those major needs in the draft. You didn't get Joey Bosa. Maybe you got Hoyt, and you didn't get Ogunjobi or anybody else. But you got DK.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel better? Because I don't.
I honestly, I don't. Because, like, what the price they gave up for DK, like, you got to fact that's baked into the equation, right? DK was paid $30+ million.
Exactly what I'm saying.
Is he worth that money? To me, no. I don't think he's a premier. I think he's like a tier 2 receiver. I don't think he's like the elite of the elite. He's very good, but he's not going to be a guy like I can consistently rely on to be a bucket in the postseason. Like,
you're not going to be able to throw DK Metcalf 15 targets every single major game.
You could see DK in January having a playoff game with like 2 catches. Like,
yep,
and I can't feel
yards.
good. I can't feel good about that investment. Whereas when they did pay Diggs, this is a guy who's going to deliver. He was pretty inconsistent in the playoffs himself, but you felt more good about the deliverance and production. And also, you're giving up a high-end draft pick. I know they had 2 second-round picks. I get it, but this defense needed to be, especially, you talk about it, you needed 3 needs. You had 3 picks, 2 seconds and a first. You obviously traded around, you moved around a little bit, but there was 3 major needs: corner, defensive tackle, and edge. They solved them all with their first 3 picks.
Yes.
You're gonna bypass one of those needs if you trade for DK Metcalf. Correct. If you trade for a George Pickens.
And more needs just in free agency depth, And the thing is if this team is going to go out and they're going to get that premier receiver, I'm going to tell you what they're going to go out and get right now. They're not just going to go out and get the biggest name. They're going to go out and somewhat do what they did with Diggs, and they're going to get a guy that they can feed volume to. They're not going to go out and get a receiver like Pickens. They're not going to go out and get a receiver like DK. Old, but they're not going to go out and get a guy like Mike Evans even next year whenever that time comes. They're going to go out and get a guy that they know Josh Allen can throw the ball to 10 to 15 times every single game, and he is going to catch at least 8 of those passes.
Yeah.
They're not going to go out and get a guy that's going to get you 5 catches, 80 yards. They're just, because that'd just be stupid. This team doesn't need they need the big plays, right? Every team does. They need the big plays, but that's not what's going to take them over the top, and so that's why I'm happy he was patient, because there wasn't one of those guys that was available this year that was rational,
No, there wasn't. And I think that's a big part of it, right? Like, there were good receivers available. Were there great receivers available? No.
And were there good receivers that you could probably make great available? Most likely not. So
yeah, I mean, I just don't feel good about taking a huge leap in faith on this receiver. Like, I think the easy thing to do and grab the low-hanging fruit of like, oh, Diggs was pretty good with the Vikings and he was great with the Bills. I just don't think it's a universal truth that if you go out and grab a tier 2 receiver that's pretty good, they're going to be great with the Bills. I just don't see that happening. And frankly, that's kind of why I love this offseason. You didn't force yourself to do anything. You solved important needs in a multitude of ways. You did it right, and you did it properly without, overspending or overdrafting players.
Yes.
You did it within the lens and within the frame of value. And
you got value to fulfill your needs.
You didn't have an offseason where you're paying Von Miller $120 million. You're paying OJ Howard a ton of money to be your tight end too. You're not doing that. You're doing it in the lens where it's like, it makes sense financially. If it doesn't work out, we have rookies waiting in the wings and we're ready to go. They have a plan A, a plan B, and a plan C on defense at every layer of the defense. Linebackers, they have depth. Defensive tackle, they got depth. Edge, they got depth. Corner, they got great depth. Safety, we'll see, but I think they had a home run. They didn't hit a home run, but I think they hit a double. I think they hit a double this offseason, and I'll take a double. I'll take runners in scoring position. Yeah. So, I think that pretty much wraps us up. I mean, it was a fun little episode. I kind of just wanted to give it a few days to let it marinate and just not be reactionary to the
I feel
WGR
better about
stuff.
it now than I did initially.
Yeah. The WGR stuff and just right after the draft and we didn't draft like the Chiefs. We didn't draft like just let it soak in for a couple of days. We'll touch base like we did today. And I mean, obviously it's going to be more distance content as we kind of are in the dog days of the offseason, but we're going to try our best to deliver for you guys. And, and it's been quite a ride, and we do appreciate everybody that has tuned in to not only the live streams, the episodes, not on Spotify, YouTube. If you're following us on Twitter or Instagram, I appreciate all the support lately. It's just been awesome. It's been so rewarding to deliver for you guys and talk to you guys and talk football, Buffalo Bills football. So Mike and I are extremely, extremely appreciative of all that. So everybody, that's in the chat or watching on Twitter or YouTube, have a great night, and go Bills.
Go Bills.